Hoyoverse has really broken into the gaming space in the last 4 years. While they have existed before this with games like Honkai Impact 3rd and a few others, you most likely know them from their big hits, Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. But Hoyoverse has been moving up, making games with higher budgets and greater production value. Zenless Zone Zero is their latest release. So does ZZZ have what it takes to stand out? Or is it ZZZing me to sleep? I won't be the first or the last person to tell you that this game oozes personality. A majority of Hoyo's big games, while visually impressive in terms of animations, are serious and don't tend to be seen in kind of a goofy light. ZZZ has a lot of serious moments, but something neat about the animations and the cutscenes is that you can see the smear frames on a character's movement.
Rise and grind.
It's definitely a unique stylistic choice that separates the game from a lot of others. From the flashy and satisfying combat to the slower and simple TV segments, this game has made me continuously note of how much different it is in stylistic choice and how that's influenced my enjoyment of the game. At its core, the presentation is what makes it so great. There's a constant influx of passionate work shown here, and the game continues to show it as you progress through the 3 currently available chapters.
So, who's our guest today, Leon?
But all my praise aside, I can't pretend this game is flawless. While it definitely has layers of polish that other big recent gachas don't have, it would be unfair for me to constantly praise this game when I do have some negatives to talk about. For one, this is more a minor gripe, but it feels like the English dub is synced slightly slower than it should be in the big cutscenes. The lip syncing in this game is miles ahead of Genshin, where they really just don't try, and Star Rail, where sometimes they don't even move their mouths. But in big cutscenes, the English VO definitely feels like it's very, very slightly behind the animations. Not to the point where it's a big deal, but just to the point where it's noticeable.
He's a real beast, so it's okay if you're nervous.
I think you're supposed to say, don't be nervous.
And on a rare occasion, the directing just feels a little bit off. I know we're in 1.0, and this doesn't happen that often, but given the liveliness of the animations, it feels like sometimes the VO doesn't match up that same energy, or is kind of lacking in other areas.
What's going on?
No way. That's impossible.
Again, it's not really that bad. Most of the time, it works. But there are just some moments where I feel like it doesn't quite match up. That aside, while not nearly as widespread, I've seen several posts about bugs within the game that include not being able to boot the game at all with certain CPUs. Again, as far as I know, this isn't a huge widespread issue, but it's worth noting that this game is not without its flaws. And I'm not sure if they really patched this yet, performance-wise, but once you reach Lumina Square, you'll also discover the game has several performance issues. I, for one, cannot walk through the area without some decent frame drops here and there. While it's not a huge deal, it's definitely frustrating to see another game struggle performance-wise in the gacha space. This is the 3rd big gacha I've played in the last 3 months, and not a single one has been devoid of crunching away at my CPU or GPU.
Target confirmed. Go. Neat and pretty.
It's showtime!
It's a gacha game. In all seriousness, ZZZ has a level of depth where you can time your button presses and even perform certain actions with specific combinations that many mobile games don't really have. But it's not some monolith of mechanical genius that stretches beyond the depth of a majority of action games. People keep trying to find games to compare this to, and to be blunt, no, this is not like Devil May Cry. There could be a level of inspiration taken from it, but you're not going to be doing insanely varied combos or anything like that. There are combos within the game, just not the DMC level stuff that you might be thinking would be in the game. Zenless Zone Zero has style, and it has a combat system that rewards you for playing right. Each character has a role and an element, and each team will benefit from having characters of the same element or of the same faction. You can mix and match. From there, the combat is pretty much your standard, with perfect dodges, to parries, to special attacks, to ultimates. The system itself isn't too complex, and it's not really that hard to start learning how to fight properly. As of right now, it feels like the value of having a stun character is incredibly high, as stun stops enemy movement and increases your damage dealt to them. Whether or not you take advantage of this is on you. The game isn't really going to force you to pull either. It gives you Anby, Billy, and Nicole for free, and since the character I wanted the most was Billy, I've kinda just stuck with this team so far. Now, endgame will be a different story, as you'll need 2 teams to clear things eventually, but for the time being, the trio is more than enough to clear anything that stands in your way. Overall, the combat system is satisfying, but not really that difficult. Roadblocks can mostly be solved with better gear. This is a gacha game, and most like other gacha games, the general solution to most of your problems is either going to be roll new units or gear your units better. But to add to all this, there's also
The train is about to enter the station. Please stand behind the yellow line and board the train in an orderly manner.
the number of elements within the game's systems may make it seem like combat's just going to be a button mashing mess. One of the issues you can find with some action games is how there can be too much going on at once. When it's not focused, the combat will feel, well, messy and unfocused. But Zenless Zone Zero manages to condense its numerous mechanics into an easy-to-understand combat system. As I said before, the game rewards you for doing things right. Do a perfect dodge, a sound effect will play, and the screen applies a gradient to notify you that you did it right. If you fill up the stun gauge, the enemy will buckle, and if you do a basic attack combo on a stunned enemy, the game will allow you to begin chain attacks with an obvious slowdown, sound effect, and button prompts. The gameplay itself is not that complex, and it's pretty easy to understand what options you have available to you for your next move. For that extra flair, outside of simply just sound effects and animations, there's something I personally really like. If you pair certain characters from the same faction together, which I think only one of these exists in the game currently, which is with Ben Bigger and Coleta, you'll get different animations for attacks and combo chains. I don't know if this changes the function of the moves itself, but I think making team comps matter beyond just simply what is best is something I desperately want more of. There are so many other combinations that could have been in the game prior to launch, and they aren't necessary, but it truly makes me happy to see this kind of thing in a team-based action game. In my eyes, the presentation and the feel of combat are the true highlights of ZZZ. It isn't the most complex or interesting system, but it leaves a lasting impact, and I hope things only go up from here. And if you didn't see my impressions from the closed beta 3, I was pretty lukewarm on the TV segments. I felt like they detracted from the focus of the game that was advertised, aka the combat, and I was hoping that the game would be very combat focused, and if they had to keep the TV stuff, just short spurts of TV exploration. So how do I feel now that I've played a good long while of 1.0? I like it. Kind of, I think. It's hard to put my finger on exactly how I feel. For me, nothing beats the combat and the overworld exploration, but I don't find myself tiring out of the TV segments as much as I thought I would. For the most part, they're quick and simple puzzles. Admittedly, there are some issues like not being able to move when certain dialogue is playing, and not having a map when the area gets too big is kind of a pain. But I'm not too hung up on all of that. I do think there are definitely some optimizations that need to happen to the TV segment to make it feel a little bit less stilted. But my general point is that I don't see TV as a highlight of the experience, but it's not really that bad either. In terms of fluidity, it definitely needs some ironing out, but the experience is not, as a whole, problematic or unenjoyable for me. Would I play a whole game centered around this? No. But the game is not centered around this, so it works out for me. Another part of Zenless Zone Zero is running around the overworld aimlessly looking for stuff. From side quests to collectible coins for the trash goblin, to bang boos that just need a little help. The overworld is basically another chunk of ZZZ. It's not nearly as explorable as Genshin or Star Rail, but I can appreciate that in a game that's not trying to be. The cities, streets, and areas you explore are compact. They generally only have as much space as they need. The designs and music are calm and relaxing. It's easy to get lost in the atmosphere of these areas, even if one of them has a car crashed into it. But I do like the ease of access and the way they show how Hoyo can get creative with their NPC design. Speaking of which, the NPCs are fairly unique. While it's obvious that many share model pieces and whatnot, that's how a lot of games work, to be honest, but there's a step beyond here too in the animations you get when you order noodles or coffee. The world feels alive and vibrant. It gives a clear perspective on building this setting that you're introduced to. And even if it's not on the scale of Genshin or Star Rail, these areas are still incredibly memorable.
Even though I dropped our new stock in the hollow.
And the narrative of Zenless Zone Zero is building up. What I mean to say is right now, by the end of the existing story content, we haven't had a definitive conclusion to the current arc. The method and type of story being told here is not that similar to Hoyo's two other big guns. In a lot of ways, it does kind of remind me of Honkai Impact 3rd. The story is seemingly going to be a larger narrative instead of each area having its own beginning, middle, and end. The aim seems to be to build up these factions of characters first. While you can argue that each chapter does technically have a beginning, middle, and end, I feel like they're generally not conclusive. As an example, if you played Genshin, Mondstadt's arc about the Anemo Archon and Dvalin does pretty much come to a close in the final part of that prologue chapter. Chapter 1 starts Liwei's arc, and Mondstadt's end is pretty conclusive for the main story, for the time being. I don't know how to say this properly, but basically every region has its own story that begins and ends within its chapter. Zenless Zone Zero's story does not conclude at the end of each chapter. The story kind of bleeds into the next chapter. Instead of focusing on a large arc with smaller arcs within it, it seems like the entire narrative is building towards this big mystery. Needless to say, I'm enjoying this story. It's refreshing to see that Hoyo isn't just going to stick to what works. My only hope is that the overall narrative unfolds properly and that each chapter isn't pushed out for the sake of needing content.
What was that? What's going on? What's happening? Hey!
Like all gacha games, though, only time will tell how the rest of this game unfolds. Right now, the roughest parts of the game are probably grinding out your levels for the additional story chapters, which can take some time. I've had a few instances where I just had to stop playing for the day and come back the next day to get the next story. But Zenless Zone Zero has a lot going for it. From the charm and style it oozes to the satisfyingly crafted combat, to a compelling narrative in its setup phase, there's so much in this game that I could go on talking about it for hours. I haven't even talked about the music that much, which, as usual, is stellar. What this game has left me so far is enough to keep me invested. I just hope they don't fumble a storyline like in Hoyo's other recent games. But this is all my opinion. So let me know what you think of Zenless Zone Zero in the comments down below. You can leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel for more things anime RPG related. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.